es un proyecto estratégico de largo plazo, en el cual los cubanos tienen y tendrían mucho que aportar, mucho que discutir con nosotros. Es un proyecto de un horizonte de 20 a 40 años, un modelo económico soberano. No queremos seguir siendo una economía colonial. Un modelo económico complementario. Venezuela tiene inmensos recursos energéticos, por ejemplo. Ningún país del Caribe o latinoamericano debería importarle combustible a Europa. ¿Por qué? Si Latinoamérica tiene entre ellos a Venezuela, con inmensos recursos energéticos. ¿Por qué Venezuela va a seguir exportándole a los países desarrollados 2,5 millones de barriles de petróleo crudo al día? Igual que hace 500 años se llevaban la materia prima, hoy se la siguen llevando de la misma forma. Un proyecto que nosotros hemos lanzado ya al mundo venezolano con el nombre de Proyecto Nacional Simón Bolívar, pero con los brazos extendidos al continente latinoamericano y caribeño.
Mira que ya viene la revolución, para que se asustan será pa' mejor. Es el pueblo entero el que ya está gritando, ¡viva la revolución!
Iranian nuclear weapons development.
They have turned the island into a communist hellhole.
The experiment in Venezuela has failed completely.
One of the ideas and books that the Bolivarian Revolution was deeply inspired by is capital, right? Karl Marx. This is essential to Chavez because a lot of people, even within the left, they tried to be Puritans and be like, he wasn't a communist. He was, don't you know, I'm a real communist. He wasn't a real communist. But Chavez studied Marx very well. And one of the concepts that Chavez understood and studied from Marx is the idea that the production process, the resources and production of a nation, of a land, should serve the people, right? The people shouldn't serve the production process. Humans should not be extensions of technology or resources, right? Those technology and resources should serve the needs of human beings. And that's exactly what Comandante Hugo Chávez promoted in Venezuela, is using the resource like oil to serve the people of Venezuela, not the other way around, for the people of Venezuela to serve oil as some sort of money-making operation. So I think that's so important to mention that Chavez was he was a student of Marx, he was a student of Bolivar, he was a student of so many people. What I want to do is I want to play a clip. This is some background on moving forward into the 1992 Revolutionary Bolivarian Movement uprising. Again, we're talking about two key events that happened in February in Venezuelan history. The Caracazo that happened on February 27, 1989, and also the Revolutionary Bolivarian Movement uprising, or quote-unquote coup, that took place in 1992, led by Comandante Hugo Chávez, who himself was in the Venezuelan military and was an anti-imperialist and defected and led an uprising against the right-wing government. And just to give you some quick background, basically there were two major attempts to overthrow the government of Carlos Andrés Pérez and the right-wing government, led by Comandante Chávez, who formed a group called the Revolutionary Bolivarian Movement 200, that was composed of both military members but also civilians who wanted to revive the visions of Bolivar, who wanted to revive socialism, who wanted to revive the idea of the profits and the resources of Venezuela going to the people and not to these wealthy bureaucrats who were in power. And so the first coup attempt took place on February 4th, 1992, led by Chavez. There was a second coup attempt in November 27, 1992. The first attempt, led by Chavez, unfortunately was unsuccessful. There were some betrayals that happened. There were some logistical issues that took place as well. But nonetheless, he still had a huge percentage of the population of Venezuela that was deeply inspired by this uprising. Some people have compared it to the Moncada barracks attack in Cuba. That was unsuccessful as well a few years prior to the Cuban Revolution. That served as the flame of ignition for this burgeoning movement, the Bolivarian movement. And 18 soldiers were killed. Some dozens more were injured. And after this attack in 1992, this coup attempt by Chavez, he was imprisoned. So he went to jail at a military prison. This is a clip with just a little bit more background on what exactly happened. And then we're going to talk about the significance of 4F and how the Bolivarian Revolution now is so deeply rooted, especially in the military, and combining the uniting the people and the military.
Now, on February 4th, 1992, the Venezuelan people witnessed a military rebellion led by Hugo Chávez that brought back hope in the country's future after dark years for the popular classes. The impact of Chávez's uprising 30 years after the event is brought to you by Leonel Retomal in a series of stories. The phrase and the image still echo in Venezuela.
Compañeros, lamentablemente, por ahora, los objetivos que nos planteamos no fueron logrados en la ciudad capital. Es decir, nosotros acá en Caracas no logramos controlar el poder.
The chief of the military uprising of February 4th, 1992 wasn't still a key player in the political chessboard, but his words and face were recorded forever in the Venezuelan popular imagery. At the beginning, there were some trust issues because the boots of soldiers were responsible for many massacres in Latin America, Venezuela included.
Capitalism in Venezuela has had two ways of ruling over the people. One is with the classic military dictatorship, like the ones of Juan Vicente Gómez and Marcos Pérez Jiménez. That runs out of luck with the events of January 1958, when the liberal representative regime was imposed, and that was the case for 40 years. But by February 1989, the popular rebellion managed to pull the brakes on the neoliberal policies that the ruling class and foreign interests were trying to force on the country. With that, they were through. The cat was out of the bag. It was public knowledge that it was not a system with popular support. They crushed that with the army, and 3 years later, something similar happened to the military rebellion of February 4th, 1992, and also in November that same year. But the main one was February's uprising, which counted with Commander Chávez's leadership. By then, the regime was exhausted politically, economically, socially. The people didn't believe in anything anymore. The inconformity grew, but there was still a void regarding the front lines, the leader or party that could represent the people's voice.
So spoken from OG of the movement, Fernando, a former guerrilla and Venezuelan revolutionary during that time period, talking about the failures of capitalism, neoliberalism, that people in Venezuela gave up on it, and rightfully so, because it didn't serve their interests and their needs as a working class. Compañero Yamir, your thoughts on the significance of 4F? And by the way, can you explain to people who are not familiar, like the culture around 4F? Because a lot of times people wear the Venezuela hat, and sometimes it'll have the 4F and sometimes it won't. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that and just your thoughts in general about the important role of the military in the Bolivarian Revolution.
Yeah, so it's right here. Look, this is the 4F right here. This is when you know you're pro-Chavista. The Escuadrillos always hate when you have this sign on the hat. But whatchamacallit, the significance. There's a lot of things to talk about. I mean, the fact that, you had these young, radical, military youth that organized an insurgency within the military to overthrow the government. I mean, it's just it's like very romantic. It's very poetic because it was the same military that killed its own people during the Caracazo, and a lot of these officers like Chavez knew that was wrong, and didn't participate. He always used to say that he didn't join the military to oppress his own people, and just for these young military officers, whether it was Hugo Chávez or Diosdado Cabello, that organized and try to avenge the victims of the Caracazo, which they would say was over 800 to 3,000 unmarked graves, people that got killed. So it was very it was very inspirational for the Venezuelan people, and you know, it was like this new type of air. It was like the rebirth of Bolivar, you know, in this black and brown man of like Hugo Chavez, you know, like I think I remember hearing Maduro talk about it in the speech of like commemorating the 30 years of this, of how, that the Caracazo became a man, you know, it like the energies of the Caracazo like centered itself into El Pueblo, into a person that looked like the people of Venezuela, you know, this Afro-indigenous man, you know, that he said these phrases like por ahora, which is like similar to when Fidel Castro said, history will absolve me, you know, por ahora being right now, that's right there, that's the face right there. And him saying that he's leading this military Bolivarian movement, and he was taking responsibility because he surrendered, because it was gonna from what I was told, because I visited the Cuartel de la Montaña, where he tried to seize the weapons, I believe, in that military barrack. It's the same military barrack where his grave is, his tombstone. His tomb is you know, it's very lovely, it's very beautiful, to like the homage of his legacy. But for the fact that Chavez, you know, he comes from the military. I mean, he's not like usually in like before Chavez, like revolutionaries came out of like La Montaña, La Sierra Maestras, or farmers movements or student movements, you know, like Chavez, and a lot of people say this, you know, he really took back like the military uniform for the people, because in Latin America, due to the history of like a Pinochet in Chile or Videla in Argentina, you know, people, you know, looked at a military uniform and they looked at it as a symbol of oppression. And Chavez, like with this insurgency, kind of reversed that, and also gave it its like civic military characteristics and also its Bolivarian characteristics, which would then be carried on. I mean, when he gets elected as the president in 1999, after serving his bid, I mean, he served over 6 years. And also, I heard like those. I actually watched a documentary before going on the show that y'all should check out about the 4th of February, because it's the 30-year commemoration. And I heard Diosdado Cabello talk about, and Diosdado Cabello was his vice president during the 2000s, and he was president for a couple of hours during the coup. So he said something about like how this coup was not like other coups, you know, because other coups in Latin America is you either have like the high command, like a Pinochet or like a Videla, and also being supported by the United States, being funded by the U.S., you know, to push neoliberalism and fascism. But this right here was different. This was, you know, avenging the people for injustice that a neoliberalist government did, and implementing socialism. It was implementing a cry against the IMF, against the neoliberalist world order. So and also, yeah, once again, resurrecting the legacy of Simón Bolívar. It was a new era of Bolivarianism. So like I would end this saying that this failed coup opened the new doors of what Venezuela was going to become and what Venezuela is right now. This was a precursor to the Bolivarian Revolution.
Beautifully said. And it's so cool that you actually got to visit that location. I'm sure it must have been a really powerful moment and something that you probably will never forget. What I want to do is, I want to play a clip. Here's some words from Comandante Chávez himself. This is a clip from 1994, 2 years after the uprising, right? The uprising against the government of Carlos Andrés Pérez after Hugo Chávez was arrested. This is Hugo Chávez in Cuba meeting with Fidel Castro. This is one of his first major public speeches, a long public speech where he basically lays out his vision and dream for what Venezuela should be like. And then we'll get some final thoughts from the comrades about the importance and the legacy of Hugo Chávez and this era and the impact of it on the Bolivarian Revolution.
Sin duda que ese insigne poeta y escritor nuestro, de esta América nuestra, don Pablo Neruda, tiene profunda razón cuando escribió: que Bolívar despierta cada 100 años, cuando despierta el pueblo. Sin duda que estamos en una era de despertares, de resurrecciones, de pueblos, de fuerzas y de esperanzas. Sin duda, presidente, que esa ola que usted anuncia, o que anunció y sigue anunciando en esa entrevista a la que me he referido, el grano de maíz, se siente y se palpa por toda la América Latina. Sin duda que estamos en era bicentenaria. Veamos entonces que como que el tiempo nos llama y nos impulsa. Es sin duda tiempo de recorrer de nuevo caminos de esperanza y de lucha. En eso andamos nosotros. Después de 10 años de trabajo intenso en el seno del ejército venezolano, después de una rebelión y otra rebelión, ahora dedicados al trabajo revolucionario, empeñados en resistirnos a esa tesis que viene del norte. Alguien me decía hace poco que todo lo malo nos viene del norte. Esa tesis del fin de la historia, del último hombre, de la era tecnotrónica, que las ideologías ya no sirven, que están de modé. No, nos resistimos, no lo aceptamos. Y hemos tomado esas 3 figuras simbólicas. Pero me decía un oficial panameño que todavía hace 4 meses andaba escondido. Me decía ese capitán panameño, a quien yo le preguntaba en la Universidad de Panamá, por cierto, una noche, que por qué andaba escondido, y me dice: yo ando escondido, comandante, porque yo ahorqué a un gringo y tengo auto de detención por asesinato. Ahora, ¿dónde están los autos de detención por los miles de muertos que hubo en la invasión a Panamá? Y la tercera vertiente en la que estamos trabajando para ir concluyendo estas palabras, este saludo, esta pasión que me mueve en esta noche, es un proyecto estratégico de largo plazo, en el cual los cubanos tienen y tendrían mucho que aportar, mucho que discutir con nosotros. Es un proyecto de un horizonte de 20 a 40 años, un modelo económico soberano. No queremos seguir siendo una economía colonial. Un modelo económico complementario. Venezuela tiene inmensos recursos energéticos, por ejemplo. Ningún país del Caribe o latinoamericano debería importarle combustible a Europa. ¿Por qué? Si Latinoamérica tiene entre ellos a Venezuela, con inmensos recursos energéticos. ¿Por qué Venezuela va a seguir exportándole a los países desarrollados 2,5 millones de barriles de petróleo crudo al día? Igual que hace 500 años se llevaban la materia prima, hoy se la siguen llevando de la misma forma. Un proyecto que nosotros hemos lanzado ya al mundo venezolano con el nombre de Proyecto Nacional Simón Bolívar, pero con los brazos extendidos al continente latinoamericano y caribeño. Un proyecto en el cual no es aventurado pensar desde el punto de vista político en una asociación de estados latinoamericanos. ¿Por qué no pensar en eso? Que fue el sueño original de nuestros libertadores. ¿Por qué seguir fragmentados? Bolivariana, que es el Canal de Panamá. Este sería un congreso o una liga permanente donde discutiríamos los latinoamericanos sobre nuestra tragedia, sobre nuestro destino, que al decir de ese gran revolucionario, ese gran escritor uruguayo Eduardo Galeano, ese destino no puede ser una maldición, es un desafío. El siglo que viene para nosotros es el siglo de la esperanza, es nuestro siglo, es el siglo de la resurrección del sueño bolivariano, del sueño de Martí, del sueño latinoamericano. Queridos amigos, ustedes me han honrado con sentarse esta noche a oír estas ideas de un soldado, de un latinoamericano entregado de lleno y para siempre a la causa de la revolución de esta América nuestra. Un inmenso abrazo bolivariano para todos ustedes.
Powerful, powerful words. I get goosebumps every time I hear Comandante Chavez speak. Brilliant, genius. That's how a communist should be talking, promoting hope, promoting unity, right? Not promoting divisions, not promoting dogmatism, not promoting better than thou identity or mine. Chavez is somebody who understood how to reach the masses and understood the importance of internationalism. By the way, for those of you who don't speak Spanish, basically to sum up, he just talked about how he rejected this whole notion of the end of history theory, Francis Fukuyama, who said that capitalism won, socialism lost, the end, happy ending. And he talked about promoting a sovereign economic model, getting rid of the colonial model that has been imposed on Latin America and the Caribbean, creating a Bolivarian project for Latin America inspired by our liberators, by our ancestors, Simón Bolívar, Francisco Morazán, José Martí, José de San Martín, and so many others, Tupac Amaru, Tupac Katari, and also talking about why we shouldn't remain fragmented, why we should cooperate as Latin American nations, and promoting this idea that the 21st century will be a century of hope. And we're seeing all of his amazing talking points, amazing ideas come to life now in Venezuela with CELAC, with ALBA, with the internationalism that Venezuela has with so many countries around the world. Really powerful stuff, man. Chavez is somebody who deeply missed. I remember I cried actually when he passed away in 2013. I was at my internship. Somebody who really inspired me and inspired all of us. So I'm just really honored to be able to share that. But maybe, Comrade Kayla, if you want to give just some final thoughts on, Chavez's speech, his vision of uniting Latin America and the Caribbean Bolivarianism, and the importance of these two rebellions in February for the Bolivarian Revolution today.
Well, I remember when I was, first starting to learn about, anti-imperialism and socialism and getting into really understanding the history of Latin America, I was so attracted to Venezuela, so specifically because it is a country that exists in kind of like two contexts. It is both South American as it is Caribbean. It is a very culturally diverse country. And let me just say, as we were having the conversation before about Venezuela as a paradise, in a way, that is true. Venezuela, before and after, Venezuela is a paradise country. Take away the politics, you go to Venezuela, it's the most beautiful country I've ever seen. And I can say that Peruvians don't attack me, but Venezuela is hands down the most beautiful country I've ever seen. And I would give anything to, get to go there again. And that's why they deserve such a beautiful leader. I mean, that's exactly who Hugo Chávez was. He was a beautiful leader that emerged from one as part of the people, not something that was like a top down, not something that was handed over as a colonial remnants that Venezuela had to deal with before. And so when you see the speech, when you see how Hugo Chávez is talking, it was actually while he was in prison that he started to formulate exactly the plan that he had for Venezuela and his economic policy. And he wrote his book. It's called The Blue Book, and it's a blue book where he literally lays out the plan of what he wants to build in Venezuela. And you go to Venezuela, don't listen to any of these Españols who live in Europe, who live in the United States, because they don't know, they're not Venezuelan people. Like, yeah, they're Venezuelan people, but they're not Venezuelan people. You go to Venezuela and Hugo Chávez is loved by everybody. Even people who don't support the government right now will always say, yeah, but Chávez was good. Yeah, but Chávez was great. Because that is how much of a popular leader that he was, because of the policies that he implemented and how much care that he had for his people. He was one with the people. And that's something that not only Venezuela, but every country in the world deserves. It deserves to have a popular working class leader that is one with the people because they come from the people. And I think it's, we were having that conversation again before, none of us are Venezuelan. And this is something that I have heard in all my years of defending Venezuela and defending Cuba against imperialism. It's like, oh, well, you're not from Venezuela, or you're from New York. So what do you know? And the reality is that Chavez, more than anybody, understood internationalism. What did he do for New York? He gave oil to people in the Bronx after, I think it was Hurricane Sandy, that they didn't have oil, and he sent that over. Hugo Chavez had helped Haiti after the earthquake and offered aid. This was true internationalism. And so in the same way that Hugo Chavez had the heart to say, why should the Venezuelan oil reserves go to these developed countries that don't need it when we have countries in our own, like in our part of our own region that needs it? is the same way where we as revolutionaries, we as anti-imperialists, we as human damn beings from the working class who feel that in our heart that our interests are one with people all over the world, despite whatever nationality borders. I have more love for the Venezuelan people, the Venezuelan working class people, than a Venezuelan from fucking Barita sitting in Bushwick, New York, is talking about why, you know, Maduro is an evil leader. We're not the same, and you can't compare us to that. And this is exactly, you show the picture here of all these revolutionaries who were stood in solidarity with one another. And I have a similar hope for people in the United States when he talks about the Caribbean and Latin America. I also have a vision that also includes, once we have a popular uprising as well, the United States, it includes Canada, because our histories are very paralleled, and there's no reason that, you know, we on the American continents compose of 1.1 billion people, 660 million, I believe, are in Latin America, nearly 400 million here in the United States. We're almost 1 billion people, and there's no reason that we should be so fragmented by wars of the bourgeoisie, the wars of the U.S. ruling class, you know, trying to turn us against the Cuban ruling class, trying to turn the Puerto Rican ruling people against the Venezuelan people. There's no need for that. Those are none of our wars. Our wars, we're together, right? We are internationalist people. We are working class people who have the same interests all together, and we need to be united in that struggle. So I don't give a fuck when somebody says, stop Venezuela splaining. No, I'm going to continue Venezuela. It's my duty as a working class person fighting for, you know, the promotion of human rights. That is a true promotion of human rights. And Hugo Chavez was the greatest example of that.